When people hear the name Mehdi Hasan, they often think of sharp interviews, intense debates, and fearless political commentary. But this time, it wasn't a heated exchange with a politician that set social media on fire. It was what he said about Islam. The clip started circulating late at night, first on X, then on YouTube Shorts, then everywhere. Within hours, it was trending across multiple platforms. In the viral moment, Mehdi didn't shout, he didn't interrupt, he didn't argue aggressively. Instead, he calmly addressed a question that has been debated for decades. Is Islam compatible with modern Western values? What followed was not just an answer. It was a statement that resonated deeply with Muslims and surprised many non-Muslims. He began by explaining that Islam, like any major faith tradition, is not a monolith. He emphasized that over 1.8 billion Muslims around the world practice their faith in diverse cultural, political, and social contexts. From Southeast Asia to Europe, from Africa to North America, Islam looks different in daily practice while remaining rooted in the same spiritual foundations. He argued that the mistake many critics make is reducing Islam to the actions of extremists, just as it would be unfair to reduce Christianity or Judaism to their most radical fringes. That comparison struck a chord. Viewers clipped it, quoted it, and debated it. What made his statement go viral wasn't outrage, it was clarity. Mehdi pointed out that the Quran speaks about justice, mercy, and human dignity, and that these values align closely with principles often described as universal human rights. He acknowledged that Muslim-majority countries, like all nations, have political systems that vary widely, some democratic, some authoritarian, but insisted that political failures should not be confused with religious doctrine. He also addressed the issue of reform, saying that Muslim communities across the world are constantly engaged in internal conversations about interpretation, tradition, and modernity. According to him, reform is not a foreign concept imposed from outside. It has always existed within Islamic intellectual history. He referenced centuries of scholarship, philosophical debate, and jurisprudential development that demonstrate Islam's dynamic tradition. That historical framing shifted the tone of the discussion. Instead of Islam being portrayed as static or resistant to change, he described it as a living civilization with intellectual depth. The audience reaction was mixed but powerful. Supporters praised his composure and knowledge, saying he articulated what many Muslims feel but struggle to express in mainstream media. Critics pushed back, arguing that he was idealizing the faith, but even those who disagreed admitted that the way he presented his case was compelling. The video kept gaining traction because it felt different from the usual shouting matches that dominate cable news. It was measured, it was structured, it was unapologetic without being hostile. At one point, he stated that Muslims in the West are not outsiders. They are citizens, contributors, taxpayers, doctors, teachers, and journalists. That line, in particular, spread quickly across social platforms. For many viewers, it felt like a necessary reminder in an era where identity politics often dominates headlines. What truly fueled the virality, however, was his closing remark in that segment. He said that Islam does not need to be defended through anger or fear, it should be understood through knowledge and engagement. That sentence became the headline across multiple reposts. People weren't just sharing a debate clip, they were sharing a perspective that challenged common narratives. The timing also mattered. Conversations about religion, secularism, and multiculturalism are increasingly central in global politics. Against that backdrop, his words felt timely. He didn't claim Islam was perfect, nor did he deny that problems exist within Muslim societies. Instead, he drew a distinction between faith and politics, belief and governance, theology and human behavior. That nuance is often lost in viral discourse, but here, it was the reason the clip exploded. Whether one agreed with him or not, the moment forced people to confront their assumptions. It sparked reaction videos, commentary threads, and long-form discussions. And as the views climbed into the millions, one thing became clear. What Mehdi Hasan said about Islam didn't just go viral because it was controversial. It went viral because it reframed the conversation in a way that demanded attention. To understand why the clip resonated so widely, it's important to unpack the structure of Mehdi Hasan's argument. He didn't rely on emotional appeals alone. He built his case step by step. First, he challenged the idea that Islam is inherently incompatible with democracy. He cited examples of Muslim communities living in democratic societies and participating fully in civic life. He argued that the existence of Muslim voters, elected officials, and activists in Western democracies undermines the claim that Islamic belief prevents democratic engagement. He framed democracy not as a religious invention, but as a political system that can coexist with multiple faith traditions. Second, he addressed the issue of women's rights, one of the most frequently cited criticisms of Islam. Rather than dismissing the concern, he acknowledged that gender inequality exists in many Muslim-majority societies. However, he stressed that cultural practices should not automatically be labeled as religious commandments. He pointed out that patriarchal norms have existed in Christian, Jewish, Hindu, and secular societies as well. By broadening the lens, he shifted the focus from Islam as uniquely problematic to patriarchy as a global historical issue. That reframing sparked debate online, with some praising his contextual approach and others accusing him of deflection. Third, he discussed extremism. This was perhaps the most delicate part of his commentary. He stated clearly that extremist violence carried out in the name of Islam is real and must be condemned unequivocally. However, he argued that holding 1.8 billion Muslims collectively responsible for the actions of a small minority is both illogical and unjust. He compared it to blaming all Christians for acts committed by violent extremists claiming Christian identity. The power of this comparison lay in its simplicity. It forced viewers to consider consistency in how they apply moral judgment. Another key element of his argument was media representation. Mehdi suggested that Islam is often discussed in Western media primarily through the lens of conflict, terrorism, war, controversy, while positive stories about Muslim communities receive far less attention. This selective framing, he argued, shapes public perception in ways that reinforce fear. He didn't accuse journalists of conspiracy. Instead, he pointed to systemic tendencies within news cycles that prioritize sensationalism. That critique resonated with many media analysts who have long discussed the economics of outrage-driven content. He also made a philosophical point. Religions are interpreted by human beings, and human beings are fallible. Therefore, any misuse of religion reflects human choices, not divine command. This distinction between scripture and interpretation is central to many theological debates, and by highlighting it, he invited viewers to separate ideology from action. The virality of his words also stemmed from his tone. He avoided preaching. He avoided speaking as though he represented all Muslims. Instead, he framed his comments as one Muslim's perspective shaped by scholarship, journalism, and lived experience. That humility made his argument more accessible. It didn't feel like propaganda, it felt like explanation. Critics argued that he downplayed legitimate concerns about conservative interpretations of Islamic law. Supporters countered that acknowledging complexity is not the same as denial. The debate expanded far beyond the original clip, with academics, activists, and commentators weighing in. Some produced detailed breakdowns of his claims, citing historical examples of Islamic governance, intellectual traditions, and reform movements. Others focused on contemporary geopolitical realities. The conversation became layered and multidimensional. In many ways, that was the real impact of what he said. It moved the discourse beyond slogans. It forced both critics and defenders of Islam to articulate their positions more clearly, whether one ultimately agreed with Mehdi Hasan or not. His viral statement functioned as a catalyst. It highlighted how public conversations about religion are often driven by fear and simplification. By introducing nuance into a polarized environment, he created a moment that demanded deeper engagement. And in today's digital age, where attention spans are short and outrage spreads quickly, a calm, structured argument can be surprisingly disruptive. That disruption is precisely what turned his comments into a viral phenomenon. Viral moments usually fade quickly, replaced by the next controversy or headline. But what Mehdi Hasan said about Islam has lingered in public discussion longer than most trending clips. The reason lies not only in the content of his argument, but in what it represents culturally. We are living in a time when religious identity is frequently politicized. In many countries, debates about immigration, national identity, and security are intertwined with perceptions of Islam. Against that backdrop, a Muslim journalist speaking confidently and articulately about his faith challenges certain stereotypes. It complicates simplistic narratives. It shows that religious commitment and critical thinking are not mutually exclusive. One of the most significant impacts of the viral clip has been among younger audiences. Many young Muslims shared the video, saying it articulated feelings they struggled to express in classrooms, workplaces, or online discussions. For them, seeing someone navigate a tough question without apology or aggression was empowering. At the same time, non-Muslim viewers commented that the explanation helped them reconsider assumptions shaped by years of negative headlines. This cross-audience engagement is rare in polarized debates. Another reason the moment matters is that it underscores the importance of media literacy. Viral content can mislead, but it can also educate. In this case, the clip encouraged people to research, read, and explore Islamic history and theology beyond surface-level narratives. It sparked book recommendations, podcast discussions, and community forums. Some critics continued to argue that Mehdi's portrayal was overly optimistic, while supporters maintained that optimism about coexistence is not naivety, but necessity. The broader lesson may be about dialogue itself. In an era dominated by algorithm-driven outrage, thoughtful conversation can still capture attention. The fact that a calm discussion about religion went viral suggests that audiences are not only hungry for conflict, they are also hungry for clarity. Mehdi Hasan's statement did not solve global tensions. It did not erase prejudice or end ideological disagreements, but it demonstrated that public discourse about Islam does not have to revolve solely around crisis and confrontation. It can involve context, history, and empathy. Ultimately, what he said matters because it reframed the question. Instead of asking whether Islam belongs in the modern world, he implied that the real question is whether modern societies are prepared to engage with religious diversity in good faith. That shift in perspective challenges everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, to think more critically about coexistence. Viral trends come and go, but ideas have staying power, and whether celebrated or criticized, the ideas expressed in that moment continue to ripple through conversations online and offline. That is why what Mehdi Hasan just said about Islam is still being discussed long after the initial surge of shares and comments.